but Slack's WebSocket protocol is pretty close.
Yeah, so right now the approach we've been taking has been more like we have SDKs that kind of just is kind of a transport layer. Like, we have a HTTP REST type of SDK, and then we're going to have like WebSocket SDK, GraphQL SDK. I apologize earlier. I was my computer crashed, and so I had to rejoin. So that's why I disappeared. I think for me, like I just want to see like an example done really well, and then we can kind of be inspired from it. And
let me try to dig some links up, and I'll post them to the group. Well, probably not. Tonight's my retirement dinner. I'm going to be too drunk, but tomorrow I'll post some links up to I'll find a couple of examples.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Stevo, curious. One of the really nice things about setting up like an Open API compliant REST API is that also makes you basically compliant with OpenAI function calling. So I'm curious, how would you be able to preserve that in switching over to this more message-oriented architecture?
That is an interesting point. We're kind of tinkering with like Llama 2 and so forth right now, and basically we're doing kind of the same thing, right? We're just kind of creating a REST interface that models OpenAI's interface. So it's interesting that there's a lot that I love about what OpenAI is doing, and then there's a lot that's just wrong in my opinion, and that's largely because they've never built a conversational experience before, and this stuff is all keyed off of building conversational experiences. So I'm just trying to share, like, with you guys, like my insights from building chatbots for 8 years. But I'll have to like noodle on that a little bit. Like right now, I would say, don't worry too much about altering your direction. If anything, I would just say, like, let's look at what comes out of the WebSocket implementation, and then figure out if that has some more broader generalities that you want to apply to the other non-WebSocket protocols, is what I would say. Because ideally, the schema should be basically the same, right, for what you're passing and the actions that you're trying to perform, right? So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anyone has any other things that related to this that you want to talk about? And Stevo, before you drop off, is there anything else that you would like to discuss?
No, I mean, I posted that listing of like everything that I feel like makes up a great agent framework. And I saw some commentaries about switching away from the word task and steps. I actually prefer the word task and steps. So,
you do?
My 2 cents, keep task and steps. I'll tell you, like, I've built my own framework called Alpha Wave, and the thing that really got me excited about what you guys are doing is, like, I looked at your protocol from the AI Summit last week, right? And I'm like, oh, well, they modeled it exactly the way that I modeled the problem, right? So I have tasks and I have steps, and the thing that I did though is that in my framework, everything is an agent all the way down the tree, right? So like I don't have commands, I have other sub agents that I federate things out to, right? And everything should just be like an agent in my mind, right? The agent, whatever you present it with a problem, then it basically is deciding which sub-agent to farm that job out to. And some of those agents will be code-based, some of them will be powered by LLMs, and then others of them should even be powered by people. So I can imagine a mechanical Turk agent where you can farm stuff out to humans where you need human level intelligence. And then you want to think about like the composability of all these things so that they all just connect like Legos together. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts that I wanted to share. I kind of summarized it. I thought a little bit more, and I don't think I missed anything in the list that I posted up to the group.
Yeah, we were discussing this actually. So we recently, when we released V1, we released it with the AP/V1 kind of link in the in our endpoint, so that we specify what version of agent protocol it is. And then during that discussion, we were also, you can kind of look at the notes from back in the days, on the agenda. It's all of our notes that we recorded. Where there were some discussions over if we should also have agents / agent ID. And this agent ID could be in the URI, right? Like you can imagine that's like kind of what you were describing, which is, this allows people to have multiple agents and use the endpoint to distinguish which agents to call.
Yeah, I sort of
Yeah.
view, like, to me, like an agent is, think of it as like a process boundary in my mind, but it's more like a service boundary. And so to me, an agent is a cluster of tasks, of one or more tasks that it can perform. And but those tasks can call other tasks, and they should be able to call other agents in other trust boundaries. And whenever I say trust boundary, what I mean is that every task in that particular agent should be within the same trust boundaries so that it has permissions to talk to each other. But then if you cross to another trust boundary, then there needs to be some sort of permissioning system to say that which task is this external agent able to call.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so how would you think of...
Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts from sort of how my system of agents works. I have multiple agents that are potentially running concurrently. So those agents are all assigned one task, and it's also not steppable currently. So what I'm going to have to do is add a loop that's basically treating potentially each task as an agent. So I'm kind of misusing it intentionally, but that's sort of how I'm thinking of integrating with my app right now.
Yeah, and I can also send some pointers just for reference to some of the things that I did in Alpha Wave, because I've rewritten it 4 times to kind of better solve the problem. Like I said, I was heavily inspired by AutoGPT. I still use the same monologue that AutoGPT, the inner monologue that AutoGPT uses. The only thing I took out was the criticism, because it actually was giving the model a complex. So I just removed that, and it actually doesn't need it. But it turns out that if you remove any other piece from that thought structure, it stops working. So, kudos to the team for getting that piece right. That was a critical kind of thing. But then from there, I've kind of worked out some other things, like how you can get, I call it progress information, all the way up from the leaf agent up to the root, and how you can make it steppable and cancelable by the outside user. But I can send some pointers to like some key spots in Alpha Wave's code where I do this at. So.
Amazing, thank you. I'm writing the notes in the doc, and you guys can all go see what's happening there. Cool. So should we, Zane, do you want to take over to do the announcement?
Yeah. So, starting from the top here, we're looking to have a JavaScript client very soon from alchaplinsky, who's working on it from issue 43. He made his own fork with that, so that'll be nice. The 4th addition to the SDK and client ecosystem that we've got going on. So that'll be nice. That should be coming soon. The JavaScript SDK has been updated. We've got an NPM package that's out there now for the agent protocol. So if anybody's using JavaScript to write agents, that is available. Then there's the we decided on a new standard for the way that we're going to be versioning our packages, where we base the major and minor off of the spec that we've created for the agent protocol. So every package for the SDKs or the clients is going to be based on that package system. So right now we're on agent protocol version 1.0. So the client and the SDK are going to be 1.0 point whatever patch version that they've come across, but we're not going to put any minors or anything in there unless they match with the agent protocol overall. Then working on a Rust CLI based on issue 72. So if you take a look at 72, that's the general gist of where we're going to be going with that for now. There's some other things that we'll be adding on to that in the future, but the basics of it right now is to make it so that we can we can connect to an agent, add tasks, add steps, sort of go through it in a intuitive CLI format, and hopefully be able to use that in workflows and things like that for GitHub Actions, workflows, things like that, to sort of simplify some of the process here, where instead of making just make things simpler using a CLI. I think it should. Then let's see. I think we've been jumping around the discussion notes and the notes with the group a little bit. So there was something about hard-coded versions on agbenchmark and autogpt. Sasha, would you want to talk about that for a sec?
Oh, that's kind of going to be resolved this week. agbenchmark was a pip package that was released by autogpt team, but then they actually merged. So they did the thing where they separated the repo, and then they were merging it back into the same repo. So the pip package is actually outdated, and so we're trying to ping them to get it removed from the pip repository. So that's the update, which is don't install the pip agbenchmark package. And yeah, take it away, Zane.
Yeah, until they
For
update
the next one.
or delete it. They're either going to update or deprecate
Or delete.
so we will see what happens there. The only other thing was really more on the discussion point. I put a big old chunk of thought bubble in there of what we learned from the AI Summit, AI Engineer Summit, and what we learned from the AutoGPT hackathon, and some other things from discussions and things like that. And so I wanted you guys' ideas on that kind of stuff. One of the main things that I learned was that there's competing ideas of what an agent is, and I think Stevo was touching on that a little bit. The concept of Langchain's definition of an agent is that an agent always has a indeterministic quality, and usually that means that they have an LLM involved in some way, shape, or form. But I don't think that that's the case for every agent. Even going back to other forms of AI algorithms that were like really sort of deterministic, like decision trees and things like that. So I don't think I think that we should have a very definite definition of what an agent is, so that whenever we're working on an agent protocol, it covers that kind of stuff, and that we separate our definition from other people's definition, because I don't think an agent can be purely indeterministic all the time, especially in Stevo's example there, where he had sub agents that could be really just any kind of process level thing, and so in the future I could see that being very useful to have deterministic systems be agents themselves, because you could have an agent use a deterministic system like a tool or something like that, but have it be its own thing. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, well, I'd agree with you that baking indeterminism in at the start feels like a mistake. I think that separating out agents from tools does feel like a good, like, semantic separation, where there are things that are there are things where you are focusing on the fact that an LLM is executing this stuff and being used as a reasoning engine, and there are things where you just think of them as like input goes in, output comes out. And so, like, yeah, making that separation feels important.
Yeah, I have to drop, guys, but I'm really interested in watching the rest of the video, so I'll catch up with you guys online.
All right.
Congrats
Catch you later,
on retiring, and yeah,
Thanks.
good to have you.
Don't party too
Yeah.
hard.
All right. Yeah, I will. See ya.
I also need to drop. Thank you guys.
No problem, HJ.
Thank you,
Thanks for coming.
HJ.
Um,
I think I want to share also, like, I think I agree with Charles. I think the way I kind of envision agents is something who's autonomous, and autonomous is kind of like involving LLM and whatnot, and that executes tasks for people or for anybody. And I do think also on separately we need a term for what Stevo was saying, right? Like a term that like encapsulates whether it's an agent or it's a autonomous or orchestrator agent that fends off to multiple agents, or a human. Like, I feel like we need a kind of a more general term to describe that class of things. And I think 2 points there is my narrow definition of what I personally think an agent is, and that the need for the other term.
I know that LangChain differentiates agents and agent executors or executors. That's sort of a useful pattern that I've been thinking of. So like the executor is basically a loop that is trying to achieve something, and it can potentially use tools and other agents. Could use deterministic processes, or it doesn't really matter. And it's a mixture usually. Yeah, I guess that's all I had to say.
Interesting. Well, did you look at tools like Llama Index and see what they do as well, or is it just, do you have experience with Llama Index and see if they have? Yeah.
It's been a little while since I've looked at Llama Index, but I think it's similar to LangChain Hub. So yeah, you're like calling out to prompts that can might be agents or just like prompt engineering, input output. Could be function calling as well. So yeah, this sort of relates back to, I guess I don't see a super important distinction at like the network or API level for distinguishing between anything.
Yeah.
Like maybe you should just have one atomic unit, and it doesn't matter if it's like a recursive agent system of agents. It just is providing like interoperability between systems.
Yeah, it just makes it easier to talk about, like, and not cause confusion. That's all. Yeah. But would you say you agree with my definition of what I think an agent is, which is it's autonomous, like it thinks for itself, it can execute, like decide what to execute, and then it also can do task. Maybe
yeah,
it shouldn't.
I guess it just would for me it's some kind of loop that is performing some sort of machine learning, which could be LLMs or classic ML, or different forms of AI as well.
Mm-hmm. And the machine learning is, classic ML. Like, it's there. How crucial is this indeterministic aspect?
For me, and maybe I'm just wrong, it's not super important to me. It could just be any kind of non-human logic or thinking, I guess.
Because that was my concept, was the decision tree aspect of algorithmic approach. That's old-fashioned, super old-fashioned. It's not something that we would normally do, but it would still qualify as an agent. I mean, that's what they did for like Halo and stuff like that. For what we considered to be AI for the longest time was stuff like that. And so it deserves its spot, I guess. And it's very deterministic, but just making sure that all makes sense.
I'm also thinking of the mechanical Turk example where an agent could be, a human also. And I think that's also important for adding like human in the loop. Like human is an agent. I guess I just think of everything as agents. Yeah.
And yeah, I worry that that makes it pretty hard to make anything agent specific, because then agents just use the existing protocols for communicating between systems, whether that's like communication between processes or communications over networks. The like communication between agents is just normal communication if agents are everything.
Yeah.
So then like what distinguishes what people are currently calling agents, what people think of as agents, is actually the internals, like the fact that they are implemented in a particular way, that they, that they have a cognitive factor to them, whether that's like a classic cognitive system SOAR style, or whether that's a human cognitive system, or whether that's a language model as a cognitive system. But then because that's an internal feature rather than an external feature, it's unclear what the what sort of external interface you would expose.
Seems like people, we have A saying how hard it would be to create agent protocol adapter for autogen. Autogen, I think we have to look into this. I personally am not familiar with autogen, but we can discuss afterwards, perhaps. I'm going to add a new role on the agenda. We need so so it seems like everyone has separate definitions of what they think agent is. And I personally think that the delineation between an autonomous, like something that's indeterministic versus something that's deterministic. When I think about deterministic, I think about the tool. Like you're basically just calling a program that's deterministic, that executes these things, right? It's just, perhaps calling an API of some sort. It's just a classic software program, piece of code. I think of that as tool. And then I think of agent as something involving like a decision-making aspect of like, oh, what should I do? Like it's maybe not indeterministic, but thinks for itself, thinks and decides for itself. Whereas a tool is something that you tell it to do and it does it, right? And then separately, when I think about human and agents, and I believe human is kind of like an agent, kind of, but I just feel like in terms of terminology, it helps to differentiate. If you want to also include human, it helps to differentiate what that general class is. I can just throw something. I can't think of any term right now. I need ChatGPT to like iterate this. Like naming things is hard problem. Some like general class to help with conversation. And I think agent executor in my head is like an orchestrator, like something that calls multiple agents, including humans, perhaps. But yeah, that's just my general thoughts.
I guess I would push back a little bit about the use of the word indeterminism, or like caution against it. Like, it is true that GPT-4 is currently non-deterministic even at temperature 0 due to like implementation details of floating point arithmetic and distributed GPU systems. But that's like not an inherent feature of the system. And in principle, they should be deterministic input-output functions at temperature 0. So the indeterminism that people refer to frequently, like in discussing LLM applications, how difficult they are to build, is really unpredictability. It's that we don't know how they will behave when we change the inputs. And that's not non-deterministic. It is it's Bayesian uncertainty, it's epistemic uncertainty rather than like fundamental physical uncertainty. And that like that distinction is important, and I think it suggests that when we're talking about agents, we're talking about systems whose behavior we don't understand or can't model. If that's what if indeterminism feels like the core thing, it's that we can't predict how it will behave in a particular in all situations the way that we can with programs, at least in principle.
Yeah, good call out. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate your feedback. And yeah, I think it's more like in my head, it's like a piece of program that thinks for itself, right? Like if it's a decision tree, then it's the data that decides where like it goes, and it's not like the system. So that's where I feel like the difference. Or Charles disagree here.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to know whether like LLMs are deterministic systems. Like you can put in an input and get a particular output. Like the weights of the LLM are also determined by data in the same way that a decision tree learned from data is determined by data. Yeah. So you could write it as
Your point.
of like if else thing you really wanted to. Just like, every floating point thing gets turned into like, 2 to the 32 if else statements.
That's fair. Yeah. So I think this I totally see your point. And this is a good discussion to have, I guess. I think like the lessons here, maybe just we should all strive to be more explicit in our communication. And when we're referring to something that's a more general class of like tool agents or humans, we can just say the general class. And when we say like LLM powered agent, we should just say LLM powered agent. So maybe that's the lesson here. All right. Is there any other points to discuss here? Do you feel like we got to the bottom of it?
I think so. I mean, it would definitely be good to have a very solid definition that we would put up on the site somewhere, something like that. Um, so I think that we've come to that, which is essentially saying, I don't know how to write the words that I'm thinking, but I'm sure we will write those words down at some point or another. So it does make sense. The only other thing separate from that was the concept of tasks and steps. And Stevo was here earlier talking about that and how he didn't really like the concept that tasks and steps made a lot of sense. And if that's the case, I mean, that's fine. There was really just some people I was talking to had struggle with the concept of task and step whenever they were talking about an agent, when the agent wasn't necessarily a task-based agent. It was a continuous agent. It was continuously looping, or as soon as it ran, it just ran infinitely. It wasn't something that took input. It was something that just processed streams or something along those lines, how it was supposed to be able to interact with that information. And my concept that I was given then was like, okay, well, whenever it starts, it creates a task, and then it creates steps as it goes along in whatever iteration it needs to. But they were still having that kind of struggle with the concept of like a task or step kind of thing. But I think that the terminology still makes plenty of sense, and I can't think of another set of words that would make more sense to fit there. So I think that's probably fine. And these are all just concepts of the core principles of the agent protocol that I do want to make sure that they make the most sense to the most people. So yeah. um,
Makes sense. The for me, like when I think about streaming, I think about WebSockets, and um, perhaps that could be an example of um, more continuous usage of the protocol.
yeah. Well, and normally when you're streaming information, like let's say I had a agent that took in an actual live stream video or something like that. Normally, though, that data is split up into little chunks that it's then processing instead of like, a main just weird continuous system. It's always split up into chunks, and so that could be represented as steps, things like that. And so the same for WebSockets. Normally with WebSockets, it's sending, uh, uh, it's emitting whatever you call the events, I guess, right? So that would be represented as steps and things like that. And so there's always some way to break those larger concepts down into something that would still fit within the structure that we've got and to be represented in the REST API style, even if it's fully live. So
I have a related sort of question about that. Again, relating to my custom implementation. So I have a streaming planning step that is the first thing that happens. And so that is just a single step agent that is prompt engineered into generating either JSON. Well, in my case, it's YAML, but it could be like JSON lines, I guess, as well. And it's just it's built in a specific way so that it can start constructing like a task graph. So that's a little bit of that's given me some pause when looking at the way that the current API for agent protocol is sort of designed, because it's a task that creates the next steps in the system, and it's streaming. So I'm not exactly sure how I would do that. I would basically have to make it not streaming to support the protocol right now. As far as I know, maybe that's not true. So like, I'm talking specifically about calling the task endpoint on my system. So another agent calling my system, for instance, would call task 0 or whatever, and that would be the planning task. And in my app, it's streaming, but I would have to implement it, I think, just as a plain HTTP call without streaming.
Yeah. That's what you're saying, like in your backend, there are data coming in streaming to you, and you want to be able to serve it to the client. Is that what you're saying?
I guess I'm saying I would have, so if I was rewriting my app to use the agent protocol like internally, I would have to be able to stream the /task endpoint to get the same performance. So it's a little bit limiting currently, I guess. Hopefully that makes sense.
I'm open to like working on a alternative that's not the REST API format, if that makes sense, to where what you're working on would work for what you think would be best for your setup, however that looks like. I'm interested to talk more about that. Like
Also
okay,
want to say that
we can take that offline. Sorry, go ahead.
There's this also like HTTP chunking as well. It's more on the more REST side. But work with us to like propose an idea, and then we can definitely like discuss and think about how to restructure it to work well for your use case as well. So we can take this offline perhaps. But
Okay,
Charles seems to be in deep in thoughts. Anything to offer here?
No, too deep to come back out.
Want to chat about how to support that space. Okay, so I added to do here. Cool. And Zane, you want to talk about the next part?
Next one was just a general what's the opinion of the agent protocol from everybody at the summit and everybody that I've talked to, and the general opinion is that everybody's on board. Really, anybody that I've talked to, I haven't heard anybody go like, that's a terrible idea. So I think that we're going in the right direction with creating an agent protocol, and I think that a lot of people are wanting something like that. Uh, and so it's at this point, I think it's just a matter of time to build tools and things and agent building agents that build agents for tools. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. So that was really the only point on that. Was just general opinion, pretty good.
Awesome. So I want to also call out on our agenda, we have this table here. So here are the things that we kind of are currently working on, and there are some owners for some of the cases. And I would encourage, obviously, one thing that we still have to talk about is tutorials. So I think like tutorials is more like, in my head, it's tied into use cases. So showing, like giving examples for how providing sample implementations of what an agent is, and and then showing people use cases, right? So that also uses agent protocol to like kind of help the community to think about how to use this, by giving examples. And then there are, I think Travis is working on a GraphQL implementation, which I will follow up with him to kind of fill in like when he thinks that the timeline. So we're planning for a V2 release. Hopefully, as more features get added in, we'll release a V2. If it's not backwards compatible, like all the V1s are going to be backwards compatible, and V2 is more non-backwards compatible. And then Zain is working on the Rust CLI. You can kind of see the issue to see the spec of the Rust the CLI and see like how it works. And John worked on a TensorFlow sorry, not TensorFlow. What did I say? TypeScript. TypeScript integration with LangChain. Thank you. So are you currently working on that? Or?
It's just a proposal right now, and I just picked it up. So if anybody wants to take a look. But yeah, I've been thinking about it for a little bit, just because it's kind of a natural thing for my project to, it would make my project easier and more maintainable. So.
Thank you. And we're obviously, yeah.
Exactly. It's like a wrapper around LangChain that like goes from agent protocol to a LangChain agent, or the other way around.
So I was, and I talked about this in the proposal, but I think the best way to go about it is try to open up some pull requests into the LangChain repositories, and they have like autogpt implemented in LangChain, for example, which is probably a stripped down version, but they have like existing agents that we could either build an agent and or build a tool that calls out to agent protocol path endpoints, for example. Like there's different abstractions that they provide that we could integrate with, and I think being in the repo would also increase visibility. People are using it and would see it.
Awesome. So we're still looking for community members to look at how to integrate with Llama Index as well as LangChain for the Python side, and then also writing tutorials and use cases, as well as I think I'm gonna look into the autogen adapter here, but yeah, any volunteers for doing these type of things?
Yeah, so on like I can start looking into tutorials and use cases. I think the natural thing to start with is sort of like hello worldy type examples, like literally how does the calculator example work with agent protocol? Like it's
Amazing.
You gotta like build up from there, and yeah, like React uses to-do list apps to explain how to use React. So like, the goal is not that people go and implement a bunch of to-do list apps. But yeah, so starting from there, and then I agree with John that getting like integrated with these other integrated in some way with these other language model using frameworks is a good idea, like good way to get eyes, and they want like documentation, they want explanations, they want use cases. Both LangChain and Llama Index make a lot of this stuff. They recognize that people are like hungry to learn and want working code to play with and work off of. So that would be the direction to go over time. So I think to start, I'll just take on the tutorials and use cases, but long term, that's connected with the integrations with LangChain and Llama Index. Yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so yeah, if any of you guys want to take on any additional tasks, feel free to take a look at this table that we have on the bottom here in the agenda doc to fill in your name and chat with us on the Agent Protocol channel. Yeah, that's probably everything that we have. Anybody else have any additional points? I saw that there's some chats going on about Microsoft.
About autogen.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you already wrote in
I-
there about the autogen adapter that I guess you'll be working on.
Yeah, I'll take a look and I'll kind of think about how to go about it and propose and let the community know soon.
Yep.
Cool. That's all. We ended 5 minutes early. But super great to have everybody. And yeah, let's keep collaborating on the Agent Protocol channel and support each other. And yeah, and let us know if you have any questions. And thank you. I'm gonna end the recording here.
Thanks, Sasha.
Thank you.